Come on, does anyone not have any plans? Fine, looks like we're gonna stay the worst and never beat them. I shouldn't even belong here. I should be with the best era or even the other era. Oh really? Then why are you even here? Everyone knows you'll never be able to beat Budokai Tenkaichi. What did you say? I'll have you know that Raging Blast, calm down. I know how you feel because I had to live with it too. But we both know that we're both better than him. This is stupid anyways. Yeah, whatever. So you guys are just gonna give up like that? Who goes there? I got a plan that can help you win. Yeah, boss, we should be careful. That's Dragon Ball Z Sagas. They say he's more infamous than you. Is that so? State your purpose. Why are you here? Calm down. I may have been made during the best era, but I'm not one of them. In fact, I share the same hatred you guys have towards them. I don't want to just defeat them. I want to overrule them. Now this era of Dragon Ball games is the one I remember the most. If anything, I grew up with this era more than the last one I talked about. You should go watch that video to see what I think about that era. Spoiler alert, it's my favorite era. However, if you've read the title of this video, you would know that I don't like this next era of Dragon Ball games, even though I grew up with it and have the most memories of it. If you've watched the last video I made on the Dragon Ball Games Era topic, you would know I ended with Dragon Ball Z Infinite World. I've already talked about the pre-PS2 games in that video as well, so if you're interested, go check it out. But back to Infinite World. This game is quite the anomaly, as I should have included it in this video rather than the last one for a simple reason, and that reason will make sense in a second. But this game came out in December 2008 as the last PS2 Dragon Ball game. Quite late for a PS2 game. But that was pretty typical, as even though the next console existed, it wasn't uncommon to see new games for the PS2. But we've already finished all the PS2 games that Dragon Ball has to offer. Of course, I can talk about the Wii games, the DS games, and any other games that aren't the quote-unquote main games. However, after the PlayStation 2, there was a console that many people followed Dragon Ball games on, and that console was none other than the PlayStation 3, and the Xbox 360 if you want to count that, as all the games that I'll be talking about came out for that as well. As I mentioned, 2008 was when Infinite World was released. Dimps is the developer who developed that game, but for whatever reason, Dimps had another thing in mind. If you think that they just made that one game in 2008, then I've got some news for you. In June of 2008, there was a game that came out for the next gen consoles, and that game was Dragon Ball Origins for the Nintendo DS. Just kidding, I needed to bring that joke back. Sorry. But in all seriousness, Dimps would go on and release Dragon Ball Burst Limit in June of 2008. Crazy how there are two games in that year, and both from the same developer. Dragon Ball Z Burst Limit is what started off the next generation of Dragon Ball games. Let me say this now before people go crazy. I know I said this is the worst era, but watch the entire video to understand where I'm coming from. With that out of the way, this game is far from bad. Graphics that we would dream for in the PS2 days, a great art style, gameplay pretty similar to the Budokai series with new mechanics. It was all here. That being said, I never owned this game. Yeah, I'm purely talking out of what I've seen of the game. I wasn't a huge fan of this one before I played the Budokai games, so I didn't really see the appeal of this game. But over the years, I've come to appreciate this game. Would I go out of my way to buy it and play it? Maybe, if the PS3 store exists in a couple of years. This game is far from perfect. Many people speculate that this game was rushed or it was incomplete. That would make sense with the size of its roster. It pretty much goes from the start of Dragon Ball Z till the Cell Saga with the inclusion of Bardock and Broly. However, people didn't let this small roster really bother them, as it was a good first step into the new generation. As I said, this was far from a bad game, but if it were given more time, maybe it could have been better. No one was really complaining. I will say though, the thing I dislike the most in this game is the motion blur. It does not help make this game look good. It actually nerfs this game's graphics in my opinion. Why does motion blur even exist? The next Dragon Ball game could really be anything. No expectations since this is a new console, and no one really knew whether they could go back to the PS2 names like a new Budokai or a new Budokai Tenkaichi. I guess Burst Limit was somewhat close to the Budokai series, but I think that's stretching it. However, the new game can definitely be called part of an old series, and in November 2009, we got Dragon Ball Raging Blast. This is technically part of the Budokai Tenkaichi series. Developed by Spike, the same developers of Budokai Tenkaichi, this was the next game into the next gen. In a way, one could believe that the only people developing Dragon Ball games at the time were Spike and Dimps. I don't blame them. They gained the trust of Dragon Ball fans through the last era, so it would be weird if you didn't have at least one game from them. Just like Burst Limit, this game was alright, and just like Burst Limit, I don't own this game. But again, I definitely see the appeal in this game, as now an arena fighter Dragon Ball game exists on the PS3. There's a new feature where you can trap a character on the wall, which is pretty cool. The graphics are just alright in my opinion. I always thought this game's colors are washed up. I don't know why that is, but the saturation was really turned down for this one. I just edited them for this video. But as always, the soundtrack is cool, the gameplay is decent, and there was not too much to complain about. It isn't as good as Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3, but at least we have a game on the newest gen that isn't really bad. We even got 2 new what if characters, or rather, transformations. Super Saiyan 3 Broly and Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. How cool. Now just like the previous era of Dragon Ball games, we have been getting new releases every year. In November 2010, Dragon Ball Raging Blast 2 was released. Yes, it was developed by the same developers. Now this was a little unexpected. I'm not sure if anyone was expecting a sequel to the previously released game, but it exists. Believe it or not, at this point of, well, living, I wasn't even a fan of Dragon Ball since I didn't even know what the series was. But it wasn't until 2011 where I got Budokai Tenkaichi 1. Oh, and don't worry, I have this game. Dragon Ball Raging Blast 2 is similar to the last game. It still has the what if transformations that were added, and even has a greater roster than the last game. It actually adds quite the characters. In fact, I just realized that some of the characters in this game didn't exist in Budokai Tenkaichi 3, and that's hard to believe given how big that game's roster is. Tarble is an interesting character, as in 2008, a special called Yo Son Goku and His Friends Return came out. In it, Tarble is stated to be Vegeta's brother. We never actually got a dub of that special, but Tarble was given an English voice in Raging Blast 2. Hachiak is another character introduced in this game. He existed since around 1993 with the OVA called Plan to Eradicate the Saiyans. That OVA was actually remade in this game, and if you watch it, you unlock this character. He's alright, I guess. Raging Blast 2 adds a new feature to its gameplay, like now you can go to Raging Soul mode when you have fully charged ki. It just makes your melee attack stronger, and you can't use specials during that mode. The game's graphics actually look worse than the first Raging Blast in my opinion. In general though, Raging Blast graphics are pretty underwhelming. I can't really say that was the case at the time, but it really felt like it was lacking something. Every stage felt like it was blending with the characters. The effects felt much less intense than the Budokai Tenkaichi games. That actually made this game feel like it lacked impact, as if the characters really weren't damaged. And in the case of Raging Blast 2, it feels like every character was made out of plastic. I don't know what it is. I will give it the benefit of the doubt though. This game's colors are a lot better than Raging Blast 1, but still, looking back at these two games, Raging Blast as a whole felt pretty underwhelming. It got rid of the charm that Budokai Tenkaichi had. Hercule is even gone. Maybe it's because I'm comparing it to Budokai Tenkaichi too much. Another year passes, and as expected, a new Dragon Ball game arrives. Shockingly, it was another game by Spike. These guys are pretty determined. I like that. However, this game was nowhere near a favorite among many people. Never mind. Maybe they should have taken a break. In October 2011, Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi was released. This time, it looks like Spike decided to release this game in October rather than in November.
What I find funny about this game is the fact that they decided on the Dragon Ball Z name again. Raging Blast 1 and 2 went with just Dragon Ball, even though they only had Z characters. This game went with Dragon Ball Z, even though they had GT characters. How funny. I truly have a lot I want to go over regarding this game. However, I think I should do it justice and give it its own video. Probably in May if you want to look forward to it. However, right now, let me go over some quick notes on this game. Although this game has a much smaller roster than Raging Blast, I think that's fine as the graphics truly make up for that. This game looks miles better than both of the Raging Blast games in my opinion. However, the most controversial thing about this game is its gameplay. Let's just say that if you enjoy playing rock paper scissors over and over again, this is the game for you. But the thing is, this game counts as a Budokai Tenkaichi game. Technically, the year after this game, another version of Ultimate Tenkaichi existed. In October 2012, Dragon Ball Z for Connect was released in North America and Europe. This was the first Dragon Ball game Spike Chunsoft made. It's technically still Spike, but they merged with Chunsoft at this point in time. It has some pretty similar graphics to Ultimate Tenkaichi, and I would also argue its gameplay is somewhat better. Like now it plays more like an arcade game than a rock paper scissors simulator. I don't own an Xbox to know that though, so sorry about that. At the end though, this game acts more like a tech demo to show what the Kinect can do, so it may be a little lackluster with its content. In November 2012, another game would be released only in North America and Europe, and that game was Dragon Ball Z Budokai HD Collection. It's a bit strange how the last two games came out only in North America and Europe, but it is what it is. This game is literally what it says it is. This was my first experience with the Budokai games, and it was a pretty positive experience. For the most part, this remaster makes the two games look pretty nice. I will say, it's strange that you can't switch between Budokai 1 and 3 after you start playing 1. The only way to do so is by getting out of the game completely and opening it again. Another thing that's strange is the fact that this game calls itself a Budokai Collection, but Budokai 2 is absent. Why is that? I don't know. It may be because of the fact that Budokai 2 and 3 are pretty similar games, but you're still missing out on some content included from Budokai 2, like the game exclusive transformations. This is somewhat unrelated, and I don't know if it's because I have the European version of the game, but Budokai 1 specifically will only have Japanese voices. I've tried to change it, but I can never find out how. This collection seems to be a pretty quickly put one, as it really is the bare minimum of what should be included. By the way, I used this version of the game to get the footage for the last video. Now here is where Dragon Ball games had slowed down releases. Here is where we experienced our first drought since Dragon Ball GT Final Bout. If you don't include the Budokai Collection and the Kinect game, Ultimate Tenkaichi was the last game to come out for a while. And it wasn't until January 2014 where we finally got the next Dragon Ball game. This was the first Dragon Ball game I had anticipated, as by that point, I was caught up with how Dragon Ball games work and the fact that there hasn't been a game since Ultimate Tenkaichi. But before that, in 2013, a new Dragon Ball movie came out. This was the first piece of content Dragon Ball would receive since Yosun Goku, and if you want to be technical, then it would be since GT. It felt as if Dragon Ball content somehow got revived for whatever reason. Not only were games in a drought, but anime and manga content too. And Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods broke that drought. Now why did I just give a history lesson? Well, that's simple, as the next Dragon Ball game to come out was Dragon Ball Z Battle of Z. This was actually the first game in the new gen of Dragon Ball games to be developed by someone other than Dimps and Spike. It was developed by ArtDink, and this game was so much different than what we were used to so far in terms of Dragon Ball games. This game plays more like a co-op game. It goes over the entire events of Dragon Ball Z to Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods. It's a 4v4 game where you have your team and the enemy team. Apparently there was an online mode in this game, but I don't recall ever playing it. This game did have a Naruto collab where you had Goku wearing Naruto clothes. I didn't redeem it even though I had the code. and I just learned while I was making this video that I had until 2020 to redeem it.
Looks like I'm 3 years too late.
This game also included Super Saiyan Bardock and Super Saiyan Vegito as DLC. I don't know why Vegito was DLC in the first place. I actually spent so much time in this game in the past and thought my bias was going to make me say this game was really good. But after replaying it, there were some bad things in this game. The gameplay isn't truly fun, especially in how limited the modes are. The mechanics are somewhat complicated, making it a little unfun, and the graphics aren't the best. I would even argue that Ultimate Tenkaichi had better graphics. To my knowledge, there wasn't any new music added, and the music used was mostly from previously released games. But the good news is that this game was the final game for the worst era of Dragon Ball games. Now Jump did get a game after Battle of Z, but just like my last video, I can't truly include this as a Dragon Ball game. The game is called J-Star's Victory Versus and came out on March 19th, 2014 for Japan and June 2015 for North America and Europe. It's pretty much a Jump Force type of arena fighter. In fact, Spike Chunsoft is back at it again, making arena fighters. But all that info wasn't important. Well, now you know. When you look back at all these games, they aren't bad per se, but you can't really put it among the top. If anything, all these games were pretty underwhelming for one reason or another. One game would have good gameplay but whatever graphics, and the next would have good graphics but meh gameplay. It's a shame as all these games would have so much potential, but the presentation made it not good. The way I would put it is, this era is only the worst because nothing from this era is enough to make you want to play it. All games have their flaws, even in the best era that I previously talked about, but this one had more flaws than good. It almost makes it feel like this era was mainly just an experimental one to see what sells and what doesn't.
This era was pretty underwhelming. I've used that word one too many times now. But really, I won't go out of my way to play any of these games, unless I was making a video on them, just like now. I guess Raging Blast is the closest for me to revisit, and the Budokai Collection, I guess. Maybe it's just my bias towards the PS3 since I don't really think highly of that console, but I feel like I would make more sacrifices to play the PS2 games I haven't got the chance to play yet than the PS3 ones. I genuinely don't know what the general community thinks about this era, but I don't see many of them revisit this era of games. Well, that's okay I guess. At least the era happened when it did, right? Wait! Don't end the video yet! I know this is sudden, but a new Budokai Tenkaichi just got teased! Actually, the same day I worked on the script was the same day it got revealed. By the time this video comes out, it should have been 2 weeks since the initial reveal. If you're a Dragon Ball fan and didn't hear of this news, where were you? Anyways, I'll go over it in the video that talks about the next era, which should come out next month. So if you're interested, why not subscribe to see that? Anyways, outro. You can do your thing now.